Have you ever felt exhausted for a reason you couldn't fully explain? Not physically tired, not because of work, not because of a lack of sleep, but tired deep inside. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your soul, the kind that makes you sit quietly at night and wonder why, despite doing so much for everyone else, you still feel empty. If that feeling sounds familiar, then this message is for you. Because today, we're going to talk about a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. A truth that hides behind smiles, kindness, sacrifice, and the desperate need to be liked. A truth that quietly destroys millions of people every single day. And that truth is this: you cannot make everyone happy without eventually making yourself miserable. Think about your life for a moment. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How many times have you canceled your own plans because someone else needed something? How many times have you stayed silent because you didn't want to disappoint anyone? How many times have you carried burdens that were never yours to carry? Most people don't realize it, but this pattern becomes a prison. At first, it feels noble. It feels kind. It feels loving. You tell yourself you're helping people. You tell yourself you're being a good friend, a good partner, a good son, a good daughter, a good co-worker, a good person. But slowly, something dangerous begins to happen. You stop asking yourself what you need. You stop paying attention to your own feelings. You stop listening to your own voice. And before you know it, your entire identity becomes built around other people's expectations. You wake up every morning thinking about what everyone else wants, what everyone else needs, what everyone else expects. And somewhere along the way, you forget about yourself. The tragedy is that this doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little. One sacrifice at a time, one compromise at a time, one yes at a time. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you don't even recognize the person staring back at you. You know what's heartbreaking? Many people spend years believing that if they just give enough, love enough, help enough, sacrifice enough, then people will finally appreciate them. They believe that endless giving will earn endless love, but life rarely works that way. In fact, the opposite often happens. The more available you become, the more people expect your availability. The more you sacrifice, the more your sacrifices become normal. The more you give, the more people assume you'll keep giving. What was once appreciated becomes expected. What was once valued becomes taken for granted. And what was once your choice becomes your obligation. That's one of the hardest lessons in life. People often don't value what you constantly provide. They simply get used to it. And when they get used to it, they stop noticing the cost. They stop seeing the late nights, the emotional energy, the stress, the sacrifice, the pain. All they see is the benefit they receive. And while they're enjoying the benefit, you're slowly running out of strength. Imagine a river, a beautiful river that gives water to every village along its path. Every day it provides life. Every day it serves others. Every day it gives. But what happens if the source of that river begins to dry up? What happens if no one protects the spring? Eventually the river disappears. And when the river disappears, nobody receives water anymore. The same thing happens to people. If you spend your entire life pouring into everyone else while neglecting yourself, eventually you'll have nothing left to give. Not because you're selfish, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And humans have limits. Yet so many people are afraid to admit that. They're afraid to set boundaries, afraid to disappoint others, afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to be called selfish. So they keep saying yes. Even when their hearts are screaming no, they keep showing up. Even when they're emotionally exhausted, they keep giving. Even when they're completely empty inside. And then they wonder why they're unhappy. The answer is simple. You cannot abandon yourself forever and expect peace. Peace doesn't come from endless sacrifice. Peace comes from balance, from self-respect, from knowing where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. But most people were never taught that. They were taught that being a good person means always being available, always being agreeable, always being accommodating, always putting others first. And while kindness is beautiful, losing yourself is not. There is a huge difference between helping others and abandoning yourself. A huge difference. One comes from love. The other comes from fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of conflict. Fear of being disliked. Fear of not being enough. Many people aren't helping others because they genuinely want to. They're helping because they're terrified of what might happen if they stop. They're terrified people might leave. They might get angry. They might judge them. They might think less of them. So they continue sacrificing themselves to maintain approval. But approval is a dangerous addiction, because no matter how much approval you receive, it's never enough. You always need more. Another compliment, another thank you, another sign that you're valued. And the moment those things disappear, you feel worthless again. That's not freedom. That's emotional dependence. Real confidence doesn't come from being approved by everyone. Real confidence comes from approving of yourself, from knowing your worth even when someone disagrees with you, from respecting your own needs, even when others don't understand them, from being able to say no without feeling guilty. And that is where your transformation begins. Not when everyone finally understands you, not when everyone finally appreciates you, not when everyone finally approves of you, but when you finally decide that your life matters too. Because the truth is this: you have spent enough years carrying everyone else's expectations, enough years shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, enough years pretending you're okay when you're not, enough years putting your dreams on hold, enough years ignoring your own voice. The question is no longer whether people will be disappointed. The real question is, how much longer are you willing to disappoint yourself? And that question has the power to change everything. The moment you begin putting yourself first, something strange happens. Not everyone celebrates. Not everyone supports you. In fact, some people become uncomfortable. Some people become distant. Some people become angry. And if you're not prepared for it, this reaction can make you question everything. You might start wondering, am I becoming selfish? Am I doing something wrong? Have I changed for the worse? But here's what most people don't understand. When you change your boundaries, the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries often resist the change. Not because you're wrong, but because your growth disrupts their expectations. Think about it. If someone has become accustomed to unlimited access to your time, your energy, your attention, and your emotional support, then the moment you begin protecting those things, it feels different to them. What once seemed freely available now requires respect. What once seemed unlimited now has limits. And limits make some people uncomfortable, especially those who never expected you to have any. This is why learning to say no can feel so difficult. You're not just saying no to a request. You're challenging a pattern. You're changing a relationship dynamic. You're rewriting a story that may have existed for years, and that takes courage, a lot of courage. Because the truth is, many of us were raised to believe that our value comes from being useful. We learned that being needed means being important, that being available means being loved, that being self-sacrificing means being good. So whenever we prioritize ourselves, guilt appears. That guilt can feel overwhelming. It whispers things like, you should do more, you should help, you should be available, you should make everyone happy. And because you've listened to that voice for years, it feels like the truth. But guilt isn't always a sign that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes guilt is simply a sign that you're doing something different, a sign that you're breaking old habits, a sign that you're finally choosing yourself, and that can feel uncomfortable. Imagine someone who has spent years carrying a heavy backpack. Eventually, they become so used to the weight that carrying it feels normal. Now imagine they finally put the backpack down. At first, it feels strange, unfamiliar, almost wrong. Not because carrying the weight was healthy, but because it had become familiar. The same thing happens emotionally. You've carried responsibility for everyone else's happiness for so long that letting go feels unnatural. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, it means you're healing. One of the most dangerous beliefs you can have is the belief that other people's happiness is your responsibility. Because if you believe that, you'll spend your entire life trying to manage emotions you cannot control. You'll constantly monitor people's reactions, their moods, their opinions, their approval. You'll become exhausted trying to keep everyone comfortable. But here's the reality. You are not responsible for everyone else's feelings. You are responsible for your actions, your character, your choices, your integrity. But you cannot control how others react. You cannot control what people think. You cannot control whether someone approves of you, and trying to control those things will drain the life out of you. Many people spend years trapped in unhealthy relationships because of this misunderstanding. Not just romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships, work relationships, all kinds. They stay because they feel responsible. Responsible for fixing, responsible for saving, responsible for carrying, responsible for healing. But some people don't want to heal. Some people don't want to change. Some people simply want someone else to carry their burden. And if you're always available to carry it, they'll gladly let you. This doesn't make them evil. It simply means they're human. People naturally move toward what's easiest, which is why boundaries are so important. Boundaries teach people how to treat you. Without boundaries, people learn that your time is unlimited, your energy is unlimited, your patience is unlimited, your availability is unlimited. But none of those things are unlimited. You are not a machine. You are not an endless resource. You are a human being. You need rest. You need peace. You need space. You need time to think, time to heal, time to grow, time to simply exist without carrying the world on your shoulders. Unfortunately, many people don't realize this until burnout arrives. Burnout doesn't happen all at once. It arrives quietly. It starts with emotional exhaustion. You wake up tired. You feel overwhelmed by small things. You lose excitement for things you once loved. You become irritated more easily. You feel disconnected, numb, empty. And eventually you start asking yourself questions that are hard to answer. Why am I so tired? Why don't I enjoy anything anymore? Why do I feel alone even when I'm surrounded by people? The answer is often hidden beneath years of self-neglect, years of putting yourself last, years of believing everyone else's needs matter more than yours. The tragedy is that many people don't notice the damage until they've completely lost touch with themselves. They know what everyone else wants, but they don't know what they want. They know everyone else's dreams, but they've forgotten their own. They know everyone else's priorities, but they can't remember the last time they honored theirs. That's not living. That's surviving. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve a life that belongs to you, a life where your needs matter, a life where your voice matters, a life where your dreams matter, a life where your peace matters. Because at the end of the day, nobody can live your life for you. Nobody can protect your mental well-being for you. Nobody can build your self-respect for you. Nobody can create your happiness for you. Those responsibilities belong to you. And the moment you accept that truth, everything begins to change. You stop chasing approval. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop feeling guilty for having limits. You stop believing that your worth depends on how much you give away. Instead, you begin building something stronger, something healthier, something real. You begin building a life based on self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. And that changes everything. Because once you understand your value, you stop begging people to recognize it. You stop proving yourself. You stop exhausting yourself. You stop shrinking. And for the first time in a very long time, you start becoming the person you were always meant to be. Stop trying to make everyone happy. The truth that could change your life, Part 3. One of the biggest lies people pleasers believe is this: if everyone is happy with me, then I will finally be happy with myself. At first, that idea sounds reasonable. After all, who doesn't want to be liked? Who doesn't want to be appreciated? Who doesn't want to feel accepted? The problem is that acceptance from others can never replace acceptance from yourself. And that's where so many people get trapped. They spend years chasing external validation while neglecting their internal reality. They become experts at reading other people's emotions, experts at avoiding conflict, experts at keeping the peace. But they never learn how to listen to their own needs. They become so focused on being loved that they forget how to love themselves. And eventually, that creates a painful emptiness. Because no matter how many compliments you receive, no matter how many people praise you, no matter how many people need you, if you don't respect yourself, none of it feels enough. For a moment, think about the person you've become. How much of your life has been shaped by fear? Fear of disappointing people, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being alone. These fears are powerful. They quietly influence decisions without us even realizing it. They make us stay silent when we should speak. They make us agree when we disagree. They make us tolerate behavior that hurts us. They make us remain in situations that drain us. Not because we want to stay, but because we're afraid of what might happen if we leave. The truth is that many people aren't trapped by other people. They're trapped by their own fear. And fear has an incredible ability to disguise itself as responsibility. It tells you, you have to stay. You have to fix this. You have to keep everyone happy. You have to sacrifice. But when you look closer, you discover something important. Most of those obligations were never truly yours. You simply accepted them because you were afraid not to. And fear is a terrible foundation for a meaningful life, because every decision made from fear pushes you further away from yourself. The saddest part? The longer you ignore your own needs, the harder it becomes to even recognize them. You become disconnected from your own identity. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what will make everyone else comfortable? You stop asking, what makes me happy? And start asking, what will avoid conflict? You stop asking, what kind of life do I want to build? And start asking, what do people expect from me? Little by little, your identity becomes shaped by other people's expectations. And eventually, you wake up one day feeling lost. Not because you've failed, not because you're weak, but because you've spent so much time becoming who everyone else wanted you to be that you've forgotten who you really are. This is why self-discovery becomes so important. Not the kind of self-discovery you see in motivational quotes. Real self-discovery. The uncomfortable kind. The kind that requires honesty. The kind that forces you to sit quietly and ask difficult questions. Questions like, what do I truly want? What am I tolerating that I shouldn't tolerate? Who am I trying so hard to impress? Why am I afraid of disappointing people? What would my life look like if I stopped living for approval? These questions can be uncomfortable, sometimes painful, because the answers often reveal truths we've spent years avoiding. But those truths are also the beginning of freedom. Because awareness changes everything. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. And once you acknowledge what's happening, you regain power. You begin seeing patterns. You begin recognizing unhealthy dynamics. You begin understanding why certain relationships leave you exhausted. You begin noticing how often you've betrayed your own needs to keep someone else comfortable. And most importantly, you begin realizing that you have a choice you've always had. You can continue living according to other people's expectations, or you can begin creating a life that reflects your own values. That choice sounds simple, but it requires courage, because choosing yourself often means disappointing people who benefited from your self-neglect. It means saying no. It means setting boundaries. It means refusing to carry responsibilities that don't belong to you. It means accepting that not everyone will understand your decisions, and that can be scary, especially if you've spent years trying to be liked. But here's something powerful to remember. Being respected is more valuable than being liked. People may like you because you're easy to use, because you never say no, because you never challenge them, because you always accommodate them. But respect is different. Respect comes when people recognize that you value yourself, that your time matters, that your energy matters, that your boundaries matter. And when you begin respecting yourself, something incredible happens. Your relationships start changing. Some become stronger. Because healthy people appreciate honesty. Healthy people appreciate boundaries. Healthy people appreciate authenticity. But other relationships begin falling apart. And while that can be painful, it's often necessary. Because some relationships survive only when one person is constantly sacrificing. The moment that sacrifice stops, the relationship collapses. Not because you failed, but because the relationship was never healthy to begin. With one of the greatest signs of personal growth is realizing that losing certain people is not always a loss. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's freedom. Sometimes it's the first step toward becoming who you're meant to be. And that's a lesson many people learn far too late. They spend years holding on to relationships that drain them. Years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Years chasing acceptance from people who never intended to fully accept them. Meanwhile, they abandon the most important relationship they'll ever have. The relationship with themselves. Because at the end of your life, you'll spend more time with yourself than anyone else. You'll hear your own thoughts, live with your own choices, carry your own memories, face your own regrets. That's why your relationship with yourself matters more than you realize. If you constantly betray yourself to please others, eventually you lose trust in yourself. You stop believing your feelings matter. You stop believing your needs matter. You stop believing your dreams matter. And when that happens, life starts feeling empty. Not because you lack success, not because you lack relationships, but because you've lost connection with the person you're supposed to be. The good news is that connection can be rebuilt, no matter how long you've ignored yourself. No matter how many years you've spent pleasing others, no matter how much of yourself you've given away, you can begin again. You can rebuild your identity. You can rediscover your voice. You can reconnect with your values. You can learn to trust yourself again. And that journey begins with one simple decision. The decision to stop abandoning yourself. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment you finally start coming home to who you truly are.